We want to discuss tonight a very practical subject, which is that on Shabbat, there's actually a lot of issues that with Shabbat. One of them is that a person is commanded, actually we're commanded, the mitzvah, to have hot meals on Shabbat. A person shouldn't have cold meals. So we're not here really to discuss the meals tonight, but we're discussing like hot drinks, right? The drinks. So what does that mean? We're talking about the issue of tea and coffee, because a person is always drinking tea and coffee because you want to stay up, you don't want to fall asleep or whatever, digest your food, all the kinds of things. After the meal, you want to have the digestion, you want to get everything going there. So you want to drink these things on Shabbat. You have to drink them every day, but on Shabbat also. Why should you be lacking on Shabbat these things? Right? Because you're eating more, and so therefore you need to eat even more. And also you get very sleepy on Shabbat. There's a lot of sleepiness. People want to sleep on Shabbat. So because of that, you need to stay up a little bit here and there, whatever. So you need coffee and tea is a very critical thing on Shabbat, in a sense, right? Sure. Anyway, there's a lot of pleasure there, right? It's also called Onig Shabbat. What does that mean? That a person gets pleasure from drinking hot drinks. They say, right, that if you only drink cold drinks, it's not really also healthy for you. You should be also drinking hot things as well. A person who's only drinking cold, they say it's not so good for his body. The hot gives them good health issues there. There's health benefits for the health as well. So if that's the case, we have to know how to make this on Shabbat. Because on Shabbat, as you know, right, there's the prohibition of cooking. There's also the prohibition of making a fire. So if that's the case, how do you make tea and coffee on Shabbat? How do you do that? Right? So first of all, right, just practically, a practical outline is that obviously we can't boil water on Shabbat. So what do? There's several solutions for that, right? Number one, you have a hot water urn, which on Shabbat, it's like electric or something like that, and you put it on, and it boils before Shabbat, and then once Shabbat comes in, it's gonna be like on standby mode, kind of like Shabbat mode. So because of that, what's going to be is that it's going to stay hot like that. There's a special mode like that in the hot water urn, which is made for Shabbat, made by Jews. So what happens is that you put it on that standby mode, that Shabbat mode, and it keeps the water hot all Shabbat like that. It stands there all Shabbat and it stays hot. So therefore all you do, right, is when you go to the urn and you open up the tap and you take hot water. That's very simple. It's very, very, very simple, right?
Are you allowed to add cold water to the tap, to the samura?
Now you want to add new cold water, right, to the top. So that we cannot do. Why? Because we can't cook on Shabbat itself. You know what I mean? So since we can't cook on Shabbat itself, so therefore you're not allowed to add more water. By the way, there's also a question that came up here in the shul regarding that. What's the situation? The situation is, right, that as you said, we Jews don't do that. Add more water to the urn. But what about if the goy comes and does it? Right? We have over here the goy, right? This guy, our friend over here. So he comes and he adds it. That's what people told me. When I first came here, they said, they told me, Rabbi, this goy comes and adds water, on Shabbat. Is that allowed to do that? Can we drink from that water? Right? Whatever, all these things. They asked me, So my initial reaction was a little bit fuzzy, but once I looked into it, so actually I found that there is permission to do that the goy puts the hot water on Shabbat. And the reason is because he himself is also drinking from there, right? So he's basically doing it for himself as well. So, there are poskim who say, there are authorities who say that when he's doing it for himself and also for the other people, even though the other people are more numerically than him, he's a minority. But nevertheless, since he's also doing it for himself, so therefore in a case like that, you are allowed to drink from that water. So therefore you're allowed to do it. But I myself, right, as a Jew, cannot put that in, right? Obviously you cannot put new water in there because it'll be cooked. Cooking on Shabbat is one of the labors, right? As we just saw in the Ten Commandments over there, right? That's number 5, right? Number 4, I'm sorry, yes. I'm getting mixed up all the time. So I'm one ahead of the so it's number 4, as you said. The person has to be very careful about Shabbat. You know that anything which is written in the Ten Commandments, why, by the way, there's a question about that, Ten Commandments. The question is, why did Hashem put those commandments separately, as if, like it's a different body than the rest of the Torah? What? So what? That makes it like what? More holy than the rest of the Torah? Some people have a mistaken notion about that. They think, because this Ten Commandments, and this is the rest of the Torah, so 10 Commandments must be more holy than the other parts of the Torah. Something like that. And this is the reason why some people have this custom, Ashkenazim, that when they read the 10 Commandments, they stand, as if like, so the Rambam says it's like heresy to do that. Why is it like heresy? Because you're making it look like, only that's part of the Torah. The rest of it is not really Torah. Just second class, whatever. And it's not really true. It's not true. It's not true. So then, if that's the question, why was the 10 Commandments put in a separate body? What's the reason why that was done? So the answer is, right, the Chazal say that the reason why the 10 Commandments were put in a separate body is because those 10 Commandments, basically, as a general body, they include the whole Torah. The whole Torah is included in those commandments. You know what I mean? In other words, those are the basic underlying principles. So what does that mean? That if a person really understands the 10 Commandments, the spirit of the 10 Commandments, the depths of these commandments, he can basically get to the whole Torah. It's from there. He can outline the whole Torah from there. You know what I mean? It's a little bit difficult to do that. We cannot do that, but that's the idea. So these are like the underlying principles of the Torah, 10 Commandments. So okay, fine. There's also another thing, right? What about the 10 Commandments? A lot of these things would have a court, but if there was a court, they could take him to the court and have him stoned. So all these things are liable to death. So the question is, what about gneva? What about theft? Right? Is theft liable to death? If I steal, I'm liable to death. Who says such a thing like that? Right? There's no such thing like that. There's no. What does a person have to do when he steals? He has to give it back. Whatever you stole, you got to give it back. That's what you have to do, right? They don't punish you to death when you steal. Right? There's not such a thing like that. So then what? No. But what about this thing? What about theft? So the answer is, right, the Chazal say the theft that it's talking about there in the 10 Commandments is not talking about stealing items, like cars, things like this. We're not talking about that. We're talking about stealing people. Right? That's what it means. Kidnapping, right? So really, for kidnapping, if you kidnap a Jew, you're liable to death on that. So this is the reason why it says that. So when it says lo tignov in 10 Commandments, it's talking about kidnapping. That's what it means. But in a general sense, right, as we said, from there you can learn all types of theft. It comes out from there. That's like a root. From there comes out everything. But specifically over there, it's talking about kidnapping people. That's what it's talking about. Okay, but anyway, that's not our topic. But getting back to what we said, right? We're talking about the issue of making. Is that hot? So what does that mean, practically speaking? It means that it can cook.
Right.
It has the power to cook if it's that hot. If it's not that hot, it cannot cook nothing. Right? That's what the Chazal tell us. The Chazal teach us like that in the Gemara. That if it's not that hot, it cannot cook nothing. Zero, garnish, right?
So
But if it's that hot, I'm saying.
If I can hold my hand there for longer than 3 seconds,
It's not going to cook, right? That's it. Yeah. It's not going to cook. So what does that mean? When I'm taking water from there, and because it's really, really hot, so therefore it can cook that water. So what does that mean? Now I'm making my coffee and tea. I'm putting in there. The problem is that water can cook those things. Why? Because it's yatzolet, it's hot. This is the reason why you have to be careful about making tea and coffee on Shabbat. You have to know how to do it. There is ways to do it, just you have to know how. So we got to learn the method. It's not so complicated.
It's not rocket science.
But a person has to understand, why and how and when and everything. Then once a person knows that, so he can do all these things with ease. Not really a problem. Enjoy Shabbat, have some hot drinks. Why should you be there without hot drinks? Like everything cold on Shabbat. Shouldn't be like that. So then what's the issue, right? The issue is like this. There are several rules that a person has, right? That now we're saying that really the water can only cook when it's inside the first kli, the first utensil. What does that mean? The hot water urn itself. If you put something in there, so that thing it will cook the egg. In a few minutes, it's going to be done, right? So that the person who does that is transgressing Shabbat. That's the way it is, right? Sure. So now the question is like this, though, right? Okay, fine, but I'm not putting the tea or the coffee inside there. What I'm doing is I'm pouring out from there into a different cup, whatever, so mug, whatever that you're using, right? So the question is now, when I put it in there, can that also cook that water?
No.
Why? Why is it amazing? It seems to be like a little bit against logic. I'll tell you why. Because sometimes the kli sheni, when you're putting the second utensil, it's still very, very hot. Could be boiling still. You know what I mean? So then what's the difference between this kli, that utensil, and this utensil? What difference does it make? It's still hot.
Heat level.
You know what I mean? Let's say it's 95 degrees, it's like almost boiling. So definitely you cannot touch that water, even though it's in the secondary utensil. So then why would we say that cannot cook? Right? It's a very not such an easy thing to understand. That kli, that utensil that was on the fire, that can cook. This thing cannot cook.
It's off the source.
So why, right? So the answer is like this, right? It says Tosfot. There's a Tosfot that answers this question. It's a very ingenious kind of answer because that utensil is absorbing the heat from it.
Has equalized.
Right, and there's nothing adding any more heat anymore there. Mm-hmm. There's no source of heat anymore. So all you're doing is you're going down. So what does that mean? According to this Tosfot, the reason why the secondary utensil cannot cook is because the heat is going down. It's decreasing.
Right.
And once it decreases, it doesn't have the power to cook, even though right now it's very hot.
It's already on the downward trend.
Interesting, by the way, just, coincidentally, I actually did an experiment on this one time. This was like this week.
There's a law in physics that talks about this.
Right, but law, okay, but now, right, I'll give you practical, practical 100%, experience. 100%. Law is okay, fine. Right? I tried something interesting. Just this, it wasn't because of this lecture, I just, tried it for some reason. Okay. What happens like this, right, I usually like to have everyday garlic. It's good for the health, Yeah. So, I take a few, right, exactly, cloves of garlic. And, you can't eat them raw because they're too bitter. So you got to do something. You got to cook it or do something to it, roast it, whatever. You got to make it a little bit edible. So what happens is like this, right? That what I usually used to do, I used to put it in the microwave, for half a minute. What happened was that just out of, convenience sake, whatever, I boiled water in a different place, in a kettle, like an electric kettle, which is faster, faster. So what I did was I took from the electric kettle, I put it into that utensil, which was second utensil, as we said, right? And I didn't put that on the fire. So I said, you know what? If I cook it anyway, So I left it in there for 10, 15 minutes, and then I poured out the water, and I tried the garlic, and it wasn't cooked. So exactly what the rabbi said, that's the way.
You proved it. You proved the theory.
Okay. So it really is true, actually, right? From what I can tell you. And garlic is not really so hard to cook, right? It's pretty easy to cook. Right, it's just, like a vegetable, basically. So it's not so hard to cook garlic. But nevertheless, this utensil was not able. The question is now, when I'm pouring out from the first utensil with the spout, I open up the spout, I'm pouring out that stream of water which is coming out of there, right? Until it lands into the second utensil, the cup. The goes on at that time where it's in the air coming out of there, just pouring out. So that's a little bit different than the water which is in the cup. As we said, right? The water which already landed into the cup is considered to be kli sheni, second utensil. Right. But what about when it's in the air coming in there?
Transition.
You understand? It's like a transition mode, exactly. Yeah. So what is that called, right? So in Hebrew we call that, in Torah we call that irui mikli rishon. What does that mean? It's a spout that's coming out of a kli rishon, of a
so it's still
primary kli, right? Right. So the question is, what designation doesn't have? Is it considered to, according to most stories, it's a middle ground. So okay, middle ground, what does that mean, middle ground? That means that it's not as hot as the first, and it's not as cold as the second, somewhere in the middle there.
I'm sorry, I want to make a point.
Yeah.
We know 100,000% that it came from the...
Oh yeah, for sure, yeah.
We're not 100% sure if it will land in the second one. So how can you relate it to the second one?
No, we don't care if it lands or not, because we're talking about what's its designation where it's in the air. That's what we care about. Exactly. That's what we care about, right? Whatever happens later, that's a different story, right? Okay, but anyway, so what happens is like this.
It's not an extension of the first?
That's the question, is it or not? That's the question. That's exactly the question, right?
It is.
So now, come and say, according to most, there's, by the way, different opinions here regarding this.
Sure.
Some say that when it comes out, flies out of that first utensil, so it can that when the water is in the air coming down from the first utensil, so then what's going to be when it hits the coffee or the tea? Is it going to cook the coffee or tea or not? That's the whole question over here.
Right.
You understand?
Sure.
So what's the answer? The answer is that if it can cook, as according to this opinion that we just said, it can cook the surface of the coffee and tea.
Not fully.
Right, but surface is also a problem.
But
You
we
know what I
have
mean?
a law in the Torah that if
Yeah.
the thing is already half cooked,
Right.
you can continue cooking it.
Ah,
Most of these
yeah.
leaves are already preserved to such a level that they're already cooked. They're all in the oven. They're fried.
Okay, we're gonna get to that. Hold your horses. We're gonna get to that. One second, okay? A couple of minutes. There's also another question, right? That cooking that it does, that water in the air, is it from the Torah cooking or from the rabbis that's cooking? In other words, the rabbi said it's cooking, but the Torah doesn't say that it's cooking. That's also another question. Two different opinions over
What's the
there, right?
definition of cooking according to Torah?
According to the Torah, cooking means you really cook something normal in the normal manner, with the fire, everything in the regular normal way. So right, full cooking, right? But here the question is this cooking from the Torah or from the rabbis? So it's a machloket. There's two different opinions over there regarding this, right? Okay, so anyway, the point is right that anyway we still have an issue with the coffee and tea that it's going to cook the coffee and tea. So then, what do we do in order to avert this problem? How do we take care of it? Right? There are some solutions, right? The truth is that in terms of which one you want to talk about first, the tea or coffee?
Either or.
What you're saying is correct.
You're right.
So
That makes sense?
yeah, sure.
100%.
So what happens is like this, right? But actually, most people don't do that, and I'll explain to you why they don't do it. But anyway, so the question is like this, right? So how do I do it? So with the tea leaves, in the religious world, the religious people do, Orthodox Jews, God bless them, what they do is like this, right? They make tea scents before Shabbat. Tea scents. What does that mean? Tea scents? They take the tea, they cook it boil it with water, right? And all the taste comes out, the color comes out, and they make like a little bit of a concentrate. You know what I mean? Yeah. So what they do is that they use that concentrate on Shabbat to make the tea.
This is chumrah. This
right?
is ridiculous.
Why do they do that? What's the reason why? The reason
you can't live like this. It's like slicing. It's like slicing your water, and we have separate tea.
Okay, so anyway, the point is right that the reason why they do it this way is because when you make it like that, once you already cooked it before Shabbat, so now putting more hot water on it is not a problem anymore. You know why? Because we have a rule in halakha, right? When it comes and bishul achar bishul. What does that mean? There is no cooking after cooking. Once you cooked it one time, it's fully cooked. You cannot cook it anymore. Even if you do, you're not going over any prohibition.
You lose the quality.
You understand? That's the different issue. When it comes to the issue of Shabbat, the prohibition of Shabbat,
right,
you're not cooking anymore because it's fully cooked. What you're doing now is you're toasting it. I don't know you're adding some more color to it, some taste. You're drying it out, whatever it is that you want to do with that thing, right? But in terms of cooking, it's done. That's it. Once you cooked it one time, and they add it to it like this. This is the best way to do it. Why is this the best way? Because the hot water now, since you got it out of the urn, it was in the cup, like Jimmy said, right? That's very cliché. It's very secondary. Okay. So then putting the scents on top is like foolproof, It's one is it's already cooked as it is, right? It was already cooked. And number two also, it's cliché, it's secondary. So you're like totally, 100%. Covered, like insurance policy. You have an insurance policy, like maximum.
You want to live
understand?
on the edge. You want to live on the
that's the question. You want to live on the edge, right? That's the question. Right? Okay, so you understand? That's the question. You know what I mean?
Can we live normally? Is there a way?
So how do you want to live normally? You probably use tea bags, right? You want to use tea bags like everybody else, right?
Sure.
Put it in there, nice. This and that.
It's not so convenient because you don't know where you are going to be.
Okay, so the question. Okay, so the question is right. What do we do with tea bags? How does it done? Right? Is it possible to do it with tea bags? Is it a possibility? So the answer is yes. There is a possibility, especially for a Sephardim, right? Why? Because there's a difference between Sephardim and Ashkenazim. So then we could do the same thing, like Jimmy said. What does that mean? I'll first put the water, and then I'll add the tea bag afterwards. Okay. And by the way, this is perfectly fine according to what we said. Why? Because now it's cliché, it's secondary. Putting the tea bag, it's not going to cook the tea at that time. It's not going to cook it, right? But the problem is, now it comes, right? The Ashkenazim, right? They have a problem with this. They have a problem. Okay. So Jimmy says they have a problem. Okay. So what's the problem?
Okay. God bless them. Let's make
for the problem is like this, right? That there's a machloket over here. There's a Ashkenazi Rishon, one of the Balei Tosfot, right? The Balei Tosfot, as we discussed, right? There was many rabbis in Tosfot. It's not one rabbi. We're talking about like a big group of people here. This one, fearing people, whatever, God-fearing people, right? So it comes and says over there, that you should really try to be, more stringent regarding this. Meaning what? That don't put things which are easy to cook. Something There are some things that cook easily more than others. Like for instance, eggs, are much easier to cook than meat. Obviously, right? You know how it is, right? There's also like spices, they cook very easily, very thin,
Like
fine,
saffron.
right? Things like this. They're much easier to cook them. All these things, right? There's also kinds of leafy vegetables, leafy stuff cooks much easier than the other stuff, whatever, because they're more thin. They're more, whatever. They're softer.
Yeah.
So comes Rabbi Elazar, and says, there are some things that actually can be cooked, maybe, and also klisheni in a second city. So they want to say from there, right, that maybe, this thing is getting cooked even clean in klisheni. Understand? So the truth is, right, is that the halacha, what it says, according to Rambam, according to the Talmud, right, according to most of the poskim Shulchan Aruch, this is not the halacha. So then what are we really worried about? Even he admits himself, by the way, Rabbi Elazar admits, the one who says all these things, that these are chumot, these are stringencies. You know what I mean?
You're older, you're 50 years old.
Right? So why do they make such stringencies like this? What's the reason why? Because Shabbat is considered to be something very severe, So therefore, they try to do a little bit more than halacha, This is something which is, known in the religious world. A little bit more careful, Don't come too close to the edge of the halacha. Stay far away from it.
Right.
So comes Rabbi Elazar and says like this. So I'll explain to you why it's not even halacha. There's actually a source in Talmud directly against this thing.
I'm sorry, you said all the poskim agree Shani cannot cook. I'm not cooking.
Right, no, that's what we just said, right? That there are some poskim who want to say that light, flimsy things. You understand? So now, what I'm telling you is that comes the Gemara and says something which seems to be against this whole idea. What does the Gemara say? The Gemara says if you have spices, right? Let's say a person cooked a dish and he forgot to put spices in there, and it's not spicy enough, not for Georgians, not for, Georgians like spicy, you know what I mean? Sure. So, for Bulgarians it's probably okay, but for Georgians, not enough, you know what I mean? So I take it, put it into a big bowl or something, and then I add spices, klisheni, right? So it says Gemara, if you take out of the pot that soup, whatever it is, right? Whatever, you take it out, you put it into klisheni, secondary. So now I can add spices in there, no problem.
You can't add it back though.
And it's still hot.
You can't add the sheni back to the
No, we're not going to add anything back. No, you're right. Yeah. Right.
Georgians will eat the whole thing.
I know what you're saying. You come over there, it's Shabbat.
Yeah.
You have the thing on the fire.
Right.
Yeah. You taste it, you say, this is blind. People are coming over. What am I going to do? You tell me that when you already take it out.
Spices according to your taste?
Cook according to some poskim.
So according to what we just said, the Gemara says meforash, it says explicitly, right, that you're allowed to do that. So this seems to be against the Sefer Yiraim, this book that we wrote, right? So I'll tell you why. Because what does he really say, right? According to his logic here, right? There are also some spices which are very easily cooked. For instance, like let's say dill, right, or parsley. It's very easy to cook those things. You know what I mean? So according to what he said, you shouldn't be able to do that. If you want to use this logic that you're saying, I'll tell you a secret. You're gonna have to erase probably 90% of the Ashkenazim their Torah.
Because 10% of the infestation. What is it? What's going on?
Okay.
No, seriously, what's going on?
We have to discuss that. But anyway, the point is, Rabotai,
wake up.
That I hear that, but the point is, right, that practically speaking, what that means is that you're allowed to do this. You know why? Because tea itself is like a spice. That's what it is. What are you putting it there for? For color, for taste? That's the idea, right? Something that you put into a drink or whatever, or to a food, for color and taste, that's called a spice. That's what it is. So Gemara says you're allowed to do that, to add a spice. 100%. You understand? So comes now, write this and this and that, says this. So they say even if it's third kli, fourth utensil, it doesn't make any difference. If it's hot, it still has this designation of being able to cook something which is light. Something which is easy to cook. So therefore, there are some Ashkenazi poskim who say not only you can't use a second one or a fourth one. Can you imagine such a thing like this?
Yalkut Yosef said that you can do sheni with no problem.
So now, right? Let me tell you something interesting. Comes the Chazon Ish, by the way, right, and says he was a big Ashkenazi posek, right? So what does the Chazon Ish say? He says that even though there are some poskim who say, right, as we said, like Khatam Sofer, they say that you shouldn't even use a third or fourth, for Ashkenazi, should not. So comes the Chazon Ish says that this is going too far. Why? Why is it going too far? Because this whole thing was taken on as a stringency, not as halacha.
It's in our culture.
Sure.
We all drink tea non-stop.
Sure. It's everywhere.
It's a
you know?
social thing.
It's also in England. You know, it's also in England. You know?
Yeah, maybe in England. Because,
England is
because they robbed India.
It's the center of tea.
but Europe, Germany, they don't have tea. Come on.
Okay. Whatever it is. Anyway, the point is right that for Sfardim, actually, it will be allowed to put the water first, and then to put the tea in there. Why? Because it's a spice, like we said. You know, what's the problem? You know? There's not any worse than that, right?
And we don't care about cooking this drink?
God bless you.
Let me ask you this. What about now? It's in my cup, the coffee or the tea, and I put the water on top. That's not
right. That's the issue. Right? We're going to talk about that right now for some reason. But the poskim say that they're not. You know, whatever. Okay, go research it if you want. Google it. You know, just like we Google 10 Commandments, we can also Google the tea. Right? The same thing, right? Whatever. So if you want to Google it, you can Google it. But meanwhile, right, until you Google it, the poskim seem to say not like that. Okay. So anyway, what you should not do is put the first tea first, and then put the water straight from the urn, right? That you should not do, right?
It's a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem. Yeah.
There are some who agree you can.
It's forbidden, right? It could be rabbinically. It could be also from the Torah. We're not sure.
So it's not going to do it.
I'm sorry.
Don't do it because it scalds the surface.
Should not do it. Right. Exactly. So okay. So now let's get to the issue of coffee, right?
Okay.
So coffee. What's the difference between coffee and tea? It's really the same coffee. There's different types of coffee, right? There's Turkish coffee, right?
Yes.
Which is ground up coffee, basically.
That's coffee.
So that's different. I'm talking about Turkish coffee.
Okay.
In Israel, they call it bots. You know what they call it? Bots. Bots in Hebrew means mud. It's like a muddy kind of coffee. That mud settles down on the bottom. You know what I mean? That all that sediment goes down there and settles in, right? So when you finish the cup, you get like a piece of mud down there, right? There's mud, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? That's Turkish coffee. That's what people like most in Israel. There's like this stuff. They're more into that stuff. So, but now it's becoming popular. Also, the instant stuff also becoming very popular. Okay, whatever it is. Anyway, the point is, right?
Some stores, for like Camarilla, we had a corner.
Right.
You have to cook it longer, and the longer you cook it, the more the coffee gives you, it's
interesting.
The caffeine.
Okay, right. So the point is, right, that because of what we just said, right, that coffee is cooked already.
Right.
So, right. We apply the principle of the Shulchan Aruch, which is what there's no cooking after cooking, right? So therefore, you should be allowed to put the water straight from the urn into the coffee.
Right. It's like an animate object.
Because it was already cooked one time. You cannot cook two times. No such thing like that. Once you cooked it, that's it, right? Now, the question is like this, though, right? The question is, how was it cooked? As we said, right, it's roasted in the oven. But now we're cooking it with water, right? So that considers to be the same thing. So according to Shulchan Aruch, according to most of the poskim, the Rambam, doesn't matter whether it was roasted or boiled, it's all the same. So therefore, we have no problem. But the Ashkenazim here also, they're stringent, right? God bless them, right? They hold, according to their poskim, according to Ramah, according to Rabbi Elazar Mimitz, this one of Balei Tosfot, he holds that this type of cooking and this type of cooking are not the same thing. So therefore, when you cook one and then you do the other, you consider it to be cooking. You know what I mean? So therefore, according to them, according to their custom, they don't do that. So therefore, if you give them Turkish coffee, right, Ashkenazi guy, he cannot put hot water straight on there from the urn. But we're allowed to do that. Why? Because we consider it to be one and the same.
Can I research this?
Is there cooking after roasting or roasting after cooking? All these kinds of variations. Okay. So as we said, right? So therefore, for the Ashkenazim, they cannot do that. They would have to put it first in a klisheni, right, and then put it on there.
Do it according to the Shulchan Aruch, right? According to Maran and whatnot. Does it have something to rely on?
No, they don't do it. That's their custom is like, because they do like the Ramah. The Ramah wrote that you should not do that. Right? The Ramah, he's their rabbi. He's their rabbi. So therefore, they don't do it.
Passing like the Ramah, even when
right. But here, we don't go like the Ramah. We go like Maran.
Convenient for us.
That's the point. Why?
That's the way it is. They accepted upon themselves this rabbi. So they Quran. He was their rabbi. He was that stuff. Why? Because even they hold that once you cooked it one time with water, you cannot cook it again with the water, the same thing. So therefore, even according to them, it's allowed. For all the more so for us. So therefore, if a person is using instant coffee, right? Whether it's freeze dry, it doesn't make any difference. It's all the same.
They're the black tea, Russian black tea, or English black tea, not gray tea.
Yeah.
Black is cooked. They cook it in a fire.
Okay, but as I told you, the poskim claim that it's not like that. So I want you to research that. If you can prove it. You buy in the store, right, exactly. Okay. Lipton, it's the kind of stuff. What about that? Okay, whatever.
Okay.
Find out, whatever.
Tea is already fried. Technically, I can use it. No, like that, like coffee.
Yeah, technically speaking, but you have to find out what's going on there exactly, right? What's the story? Okay, so anyway, getting back to what we said, there's also other issues, right? Besides the coffee and tea itself, which is what? There's also the issue of the sugar. Mm-hmm. What about the sugar? So the sugar is also not a problem. You know why? That's also cooked.
It's refined.
In a sense, they cook the sugar. So therefore, since they cooked it, it's allowed for Ashkenazi, it's allowed for Sephardi, allowed for
what about creamer?
Like creamer, now they're not allowed to do that this way. So you have to know, right? Which goes first? Which came first? The chicken or the egg, whatever. The coffee or the tea or the milk. Which came first? So first the coffee should come, and then the milk on top. So that's not a problem because the kli sheni, right? The secondary kli will not be able to cook that. The Ashkenazim probably by the way, they will do all these things in a third utensil, just to be on the safe side. You know what I mean? Because they have all kinds of issues with this. That's the way they are. God bless them. Mm-hmm. That's the way it is. Okay, so we got the idea more or less, right? What's with coffee and tea, right? How to do, right? Whatever. So if you follow these rules, by the way, you're going to be okay. You're not going to have any problems. It's not so complicated.
No.
And the truth is, right, that if a person doesn't want to make sense, for Shabbat, it's okay. He doesn't have to make sense. Even though, as we said, right, custom by amongst religious rules to make sense.
Should we do it?
These kinds of things, when they can be canceled, when they cannot be canceled, right? All these things.
Good night.
So.
Good night.
Let's a little bit talk about that, right? First of all, where do we, by the way, find in the Torah that the rabbis are authorized to make the? Who gave them this authority? Well, maybe they're just like infringing on our rights. They're taking away our human rights. Maybe that's they're infringing on us. What a lot of people think by that this way. They say, who gave these rabbis the power? Because they have a big beard? What's they have tzitzit? What, they have peot? What gives them the right to make decrees on us, right? So the truth is, it's written in the Torah, right? Where is this written in the Torah? It says, ve'asita kechol asher yorucha. It says practical experience, a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom, a lot of holiness, a lot of things that built themselves up. You have to be a professional for this, right? People think, by the way, for some reason, what the funny thing is? For some reason, everybody knows that everything requires profession. Doctor has to be professional. Lawyer has to be professional. Accountant has to be professional. For some reason, when it comes to religion, everybody thinks he's professional. Like, I know. What are you talking about? Don't teach me. I know everything. They feel like it's like their own domain. You know what I mean? But they don't realize that just like all these things require profession, also being a rabbi brings a profession. It's the same idea, you know what I mean? So a person has to understand that. So this is the reason why a person has to have a little bit of humility, to understand that being a rabbi is a professional issue. What does it mean professional? What does that mean to be a rabbi professional? Not be, you have to be a different standard. You cannot be like everybody else. Like, for instance, I'll give you one example to make you understand. There's many examples, but this is just one, right? What's one of the differences between a Talmid Chacham and a regular person, regular Jew? Right? It says in the Halakha, Rambam says, it says in the Talmud also, that a Talmid Chacham should not enjoy Seudat Reshut. You know what that means? That means he's going to a meal. He was invited. He was invited to a nice party. Come, let's, making a party, this and that. So if it's a regular person, he'll say, okay, I'm coming. You're sitting and slobbering over food, fancy foods, fancy dishes and all. But the question is, what was this meal made for? Talmid Chacham should only be eating to sustain himself, so he can do the will of God, to serve God. Right. He shouldn't be eating for pleasure, to indulge, and fill up his stomach and make himself into a balloon. That's not the idea. So what does that mean? The Talmid Chacham has to be above, So when should he go there? If it's the Seudat Mitzvah, Bar Mitzvah, Brit Milah, okay, that's Seudat Mitzvah. It's a Mitzvah. Right. But to go to a regular meal, just to party it up, you're a rabbi, man. What do you think you're like everybody else? You have to hold yourself a little bit, You know, a little bit,
But
you
in
know.
that case, there are possibilities. They don't disrespect.
Right, so it's not disrespect. You know why? Because everybody knows that Talmid Chacham. So the truth is, right, that's exactly what you're saying is very, very important. Why? Because there are sometimes a person gets invited, a rabbi gets invited, Talmid Chacham, to a certain event. So they say that what? That if they're inviting him, you know why? Because they know he's a rabbi. He's going to say some divrei Torah. So he should go, you know? Yeah. To Damadrianos, Jamati, you know?
Okay,
to go, you should go.
100%.
But the truth is, you know, that even though we tell you to go, but don't sit there and slobber over the food, you know, with everybody else.
See,
go! You know? So, for example, to show you what's a Talmid Chacham. But he has to be a little bit different, whatever. So Talmid Chacham is not a regular person. You should not be a regular person. So what I'm saying is that rabbis like this, they were able to make decrees. But you know what? There was all different. By the way, can we make decrees today in our generation? We're not allowed to do any decrees.
But we can weigh the waters.
You understand? We can apply things. Right? But we cannot make new decrees in our generation. A lot of people have this mistake, by the way. They think, oh, you know, let's make this now not allowed. This is not allowed. This is prohibited. Who gave you permission to do all these things? You know, to add all kinds of things to the Torah. No, we have no permission to do that. So when was the permission to make decrees? And when did it end? When the Talmud was sealed. That's it. Once the Talmud was sealed, this was about 1800 years ago, right? Whatever. Once the Talmud was sealed, no more decrees. Not allowed to make any more decrees.
What do you mean sealed?
That means they wrote the conclusions. The writing was done. The conclusions were the ones that were made before. So there, right? The question is like this. Sometimes what happens is that the rabbis made decrees, and they gave you a reason for that decree. You know what I mean? But the reason doesn't apply anymore.
The situation
the world doesn't apply anymore. So the question is, are we still obligated to keep that, even though the reason doesn't apply anymore or not? This is the question, right? So there's a general rule brought down in the Gemara that even though the reason doesn't apply anymore, sometimes you still have to keep it. What's the reason for that? Because the Gemara says, right, that since it was made such by wise men, big courts, you know, big, very wise people, so we don't have the wisdom to know that unless we have the same number of people like them, the same wisdom, and we don't have that. A person wasn't allowed to leave drinks open, you know, without covering them. When he leaves the room, goes to sleep, whatever. Why is that? Because we're afraid a snake is going to come, you know, and drink from there and put his venom inside. It's going to kill you. You come and drink that in the morning, you'll be in Mount Hebron cemetery. God forbid. Overnight, or even like, you know, sometime unattended. You know, yeah, for a while, right? Yeah. So the Talmud says you're not allowed to do that and if you did it, you're not allowed to drink that. You have to spill it out because it may have venom in there. So then, right?
You are not allowed to do it, or you should not do it.
You're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to do it. And if you did it, you have to spill it out. Right, but you're not allowed to, you know, you're not allowed to go to the hospital, this and that, all kinds of venomous snakes. Right? There are a lot of snakes. In Eretz Israel, there are a lot of snakes. But, so then what are we talking about? Right? So the difference is like this, right? That in those days, the difference was that they used to come into people's houses, you know, and they used to come and roam around. You understand? So nowadays, we don't really find that so much. It's very, very rare.
My grandma told me back in Uzbekistan, they had snakes in their home.
Yes.
It's possible, but it's very rare. You know, it's not so common. So therefore, in those days, it was like something like it's like a standard procedure. You know, like in other words, you could assume that there a snake came in. But we just said, wait a second, but you're not allowed to nullify the prohibition if the reason doesn't apply. So what happened over here? Right? So the truth is that there are several reasons why, in certain cases, we actually do nullify the prohibitions. In certain cases. What does that mean? One example is like this, right? That, let's say, for instance, that decree was not made by a high court. You know what it means, high court? 70, you know, judges, big people, you know, devastating rabbis. You know, people who are
they'll rip you in half.
super wise people. It's only things which are made by the high court of 70 judges. Top-notch people, you know? Best of the best. If it wasn't made by a court like that, if the reason doesn't apply anymore, we also can nullify. That's one thing, right? That's one technical issue that we have to understand. There's also another issue, right? Which is brought down in the poskim. Interesting issue. They say that, when do we say, that it says in the Talmud, right? That we don't nullify. One more time, right? It says that one of the poskim, some of the poskim say like this, right? He brings down Tarat Habayit, Chelek Bet, right here, right? It's like Tarat Habayit. He brings it over here. Says the rabbi that sometimes what happens is that since the reason is very well known in society why this decree was made, So if it's very well known, once the reason doesn't apply, we can nullify. So that also has a second factor that makes it able to be nullified. There's also, I'll give you a third example, right? Which is what? That this thing that they prohibited, because they were afraid you're going to carry it in the public domain where there's no eruv there, so you're going to be desecrating Shabbat. So therefore they nullified the mitzvah of lulav on Shabbat in order that you shouldn't come to carry it. One famous example, right? There's many of these like that. So now, right, come to say, if there was a mitzvah, and the reason doesn't apply anymore, so therefore we can nullify. Can you imagine? This is also brought down the poskim. So there are, right, as we said, several reasons why. There's also another issue. The fourth one I'll give you, right? We'll end with here, guys. I don't want to keep you guys too long, right? Have to get back to regular life, right? Regular mundane life. Okay, so okay, you can stay here all night if you want. I have no problem. Okay. So when Jimmy gets into it, he gets into it. Okay. So so now we're like putting it in the closet, you know? We're storing it up in the closet, you know, in the basement. We're bringing it
So you're not nullifying it. Nullifying it means
well, I mean, yeah, you can call it whatever you want. There's right. You're right. There's technical nullification. In other words, to come and nullify something, actively speaking. That's what you